And this is an important day because we have a very distinguished guest speaker who is with us today, Dr. Indran Naidu. He is director of UNDP's Independent Evaluation Office, and he is setting quite a, I'd say, benchmark in the UN system as to how good evaluation gets done. He is a man of great courage. He is evidence-based, and he pretty much tells it the way he sees it. So he lives without fear, and I think that is just a tremendous characteristic and a tremendous attribute for anyone who's going to run an evaluation office. Prior to coming to UNDP, Indran, 3 years ago? 3 years? Yeah, he's been in UNDP for 3 years. He is a South African national, and he held a number of senior evaluation posts in South Africa, including the Department of Land Affairs, and then the, let's see, the term for the National, Public Service Commission, the PSC, sorry. Anyway, he has been very active inside government, and he has been very active in supporting the emergence of an evaluation community in South Africa, having worked very much with the South African Monitoring and Evaluation Association. And it produced 3 biennial conferences in South Africa under his leadership. He's also been an elected board member of IDEAS. All of you are members of IDEAS, and Indran's also a member of IDEAS and has been on the board. I would just say that he flew up here to give this talk today and to sit on a panel tomorrow, and then he heads home and is back on the road. The man travels a lot, and he knows airplane schedules all over the world, which is kind of scary when you know airplane schedules well enough all over the world. In any event, it is a great honor. This is one of the good guys. This is really, truly one of the good guys in evaluation, and for that reason, it's a real honor for us to have Indran here with us at IPDET 2014. May I ask, please, from all of you for a very warm IPDET welcome for Indran Naidu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure and honor to be here to address you once again. I want to congratulate all of you for having got here, because I know it has been an extremely competitive process. It was also a pleasure to see my countrymen and women, 10 South Africans who have been on the program this year and former staff members. Always an honor to see you. But to thank those of you from countries that have not been involved in evaluation before for making the time and effort to come in. Because eventually, if we want to make a difference, we need to make a difference from all parts of the world. It cannot just be the same areas. So, and I'm sure you're having a great time. This is an absolute privilege in your lives. You'll remember it. And it is my privilege to share a few thoughts with you today on the Independent Evaluation Office of the UNDP. I will also pause a little and talk about the UNEG, which is the United Nations Evaluation Group, which is our professional association, because that links to a key issue of professionalization. And part of the reason you are here is to improve your own capacity, and I think that is an important discussion. My discussion today is going to focus on really a key message is to make evaluation count. Because sometimes when we get very involved at a technical level, we tend to forget that our real purpose is to make a difference, and I'm sure we all have the vision to change the world. And in making evaluation count, we need to look at the dynamic triad between independence, credibility, and utility. And I will then share some thoughts in terms of the experience from the Independent Evaluation Office of the UNDP, which I head. On the left of your screen, you'll see a publication, and the title of it is Solutions Related to Challenges with Independence, Credibility, and Utility. And these are lessons from a very successful event we had last year in Sao Paulo, which I'll talk about, where practitioners, government, NGOs, civil society came together to ask, what does it mean in practice to ensure that you get high-quality evaluations in order to make evaluation count? The evaluant, where I work, we are in 177 countries around the world, and part of the mandate is to ensure that we provide an evaluation narrative to key partners both at the global and the regional and country level in the effectiveness of UNDP. And that affects the extent to which it is perpetuated, in the extent to which it gets further funding. The annual budget is more than $5 billion. It's about $7 billion if you add other aspects. And the focus areas of UNDP are poverty alleviation, democratic governance, energy and the environment, and crisis prevention and recovery. And I'm very pleased that there's many people here from UN and UNDP, which is clearly the largest development agency within the UN, and that's what it hopes to do and focus. But if you're talking about influencing the evaluant at all levels, which I've just shown, some of the highlights would be that the IEO, the Independent Evaluation Office, the evaluations have influenced the new strategic plan of UNDP. So it has a strategic plan every 4 years. And for 2014 to 2017, all UNDP work relates to previous evaluations. So you have very high utility, which you'd be happy to know about. We have a 90% uptake of recommendations. Management reflects in its documents how it addressed recommendations and updates a public website. So the links are on this presentation, and you'll see exactly where they say what they have done. And all new programs must be preceded by and include a response to an evaluation. So whether it's a global program or one of those that happens in 135 countries, the prerequisite for a new country program document is an independent evaluation. So as you can understand, evaluation is taken very, very seriously in the UNDP. Now, some recent evaluations that have influenced the discourse, both in evaluation and in development. First, we have the annual report on evaluation, which has 180 hyperlinks, and it's on the website, which provides the source document, which supports what we are saying about performance. We have a publication that has just come out, will be taught a course by Yua Utu later in this week on evaluating environment in international development, and of course, the strategic plan evaluation. At the country level, we do a lot of work, and all evaluations are translated into the relevant country language. I've just come back from Afghanistan, where we completed the evaluation that will be translated into Arabic. We were in Timor-Leste, where it will be in Tetum. And not only we focus on the printed word, but we also are moving more into social media so that we get the messages across in a very accessible and real way with communities. Now, the critical question, the how question. If we talk about professional evaluation, what does it mean in practice? And I would like to pause a little on principles, approaches, and ensuring that the end is in sight. Because quite often when we get very busy and we are so engrossed in our activity and dealing with the politics of doing evaluation, we tend to forget that there is a certain basis from which we need to proceed. And I call this the evaluation triad. And it is dynamic. One influences the other. At the basis, independence is fundamental, and as far as I'm concerned, a non-negotiable. The next issue is credibility, which pertains to the methods, how you do your work, and you are being here trained in order to do your work better. And of course, if those elements are right, you're likely to get higher utility. But of course, independence also affects utility, because if you're independent, they are more likely to listen to you. Now, the independent evaluation in UNDP is guided by a board which has approved an evaluation policy, and this policy is periodically reviewed. It's being reviewed at the moment. Apart from the policy, the office is structurally independent, and that it reports directly to the executive board, and the board appoints, renews, and can dismiss the director of evaluation. So it's not under the management. So one of the challenges you have when you're doing independent evaluation, you may upset people, and they may not want you there for too long. So it's important that you have the protection. Because most certainly, whilst Ray says he's one of the nice guys to the evaluation community, but you often are not perceived as a nice guy to the people you are evaluating. We've also tried to improve the process by ensuring that you have management engagement from inception to conclusion. Independence does not mean alienation or detachment. It means principled engagement. Right? Because at the end, irrespective of the result, if the evaluand is happy that you have given them the chance to state their point of view, that in itself is a learning process. Because quite often one thinks that one is independent, therefore one cannot justify, or one does not have to justify how one is going about the work. Transparency is quite critical to that. As far as independence goes, I've spoken about the reporting line, sorry. Internally, the staff are protected from occupational detriment. So my colleagues who are here cannot be penalized in terms of their mobility. They are protected. The director has a command over their career. And of course, on the right-hand side, you have a quality assurance panel. We're very happy that Ray is a member of this panel. But what the International Advisory Panel does, it scrutinizes all the work of the Evaluation Office and reports directly to the board in an annual statement. So you have people from across the globe who have no reason to say things any other way, and they just look at the issues of the credibility. Now, as far as credibility goes, there's many elements that we need to look at simultaneously. Right at the top is methodology, because when they don't like the result, they shoot the methods, as you know. There's an issue of guidance, what you provide. There's institutional linkages and capacity, and there's also professional networks, all of which come together and add and give us what is called credibility. As far as utility goes, there's many ways in which you get utility. Firstly, you need to ensure there's uptake of recommendations. If you go onto our website, after the report, the management has to state what it's going to do with the recommendations in real time, and the public can decide in terms of what that means. We also are high on stakeholder engagement, so every country-level evaluation, in most cases, I personally go to them. We present the findings and the results, and we engage with those stakeholders, civil society, etc. We've had some difficult ones in Afghanistan. You'll read about it in the next few weeks. In Timor-Leste, we're going to be in Sierra Leone in the next few weeks. But these are very contentious evaluations because it's saying tough things. But eventually, what is absolutely important is that you stick to the facts and you stick to the results. And do not take a short-term view, but take a long-term view on how your recommendations are going to shift the organization or change the world as it is supposed to. And that's why independent evaluation becomes so significant. And of course, in terms of organizational and accountability and learning, there's various measures that we have in place in order to bring about the transparency. Generally, in big international organizations, when results are negative, they prefer you not to share it. So your communication unit in your evaluation office needs to be doing that. You can't expect an automatic uptake on it. A few thoughts about the United Nations Evaluation Group. We have our own professional network making up 45 agencies, and these are evaluation units at various stages of maturity. And this is the way in which we try to support each other. We've got norms and standards, we've got peer reviews, and our mission is really to promote independence, credibility, and usefulness of evaluation. Now, although there's 45 agencies that are members of UNEG, there's only 3 of them that are independent, that report to the board. And we are working now to make more of them independent, and you can imagine the pushback that one gets in this case. As far as professionalization goes, if we want evaluation to be a professional class, where it's not just people where they can't use them elsewhere, they send them to the evaluation office, you need to focus on what this means in terms of accreditation. And that discussion is happening right now. We have in the audience Judita, who's taking the course. Where's Judita? Yes, and she's going to help UNEG to get professionalized, which we're not. And that will be drawing a lot on the experience that we have over in this network. But also in terms of what this means in terms of norms and standards. They are the United Nations Evaluation Group norms and standards, but many are not followed in practice. And these norms and standards are a variation of the OECD DAC criteria, etc. So quite often they get used selectively. And what we want to do is to change that as much as possible. UNEG has, for the first time, decided to also be results-based and focused. It was a loose network for many years, and we now have our own area, and we're looking at the various elements. What makes a good evaluation? And if you go to the website, you'll be able to see that we focus on multiple issues, not just the issue of professionalization, but how do you work in real context in trying to improve accountability and learning. A key part of our work is not just to be inward-looking, and we take very seriously how we support government. So over the last 6 years, we have an initiative called the National Evaluation Capacity, which focuses on working with government. And on the left-hand side, what you would see is a growth in these engagements. They call the next series National Evaluation Capacity. The first was held in Morocco. The second was held in South Africa with the Public Service Commission. The third was held in Sao Paulo. And bringing together these people, they came up with 18 commitments. And these are very practical commitments on how do you work in the very difficult terrain in helping governments build their capacity so they can evaluate better in order to deliver services to the people they purport to do. And once again, coming to the issue of the credibility, independence, and utility, the Sao Paulo discussions, and the proceedings is on the website, went into great depth, moving from the theoretical to the very practical in making evaluation count. 2015 has been declared the year of evaluation. It's a good year for us, a great year. And we are working right now extremely hard in trying to have it declared as a UN resolution. And hopefully we'll be successful. And that makes a big difference on the ground. So when you get pushback from a government, you can say, well, this is a UN resolution. It's a year of evaluation. Some talk about evaluation rights. We have human rights. Evaluation rights. People have a right that the programs they get are evaluated. And these are discussions that one needs to get in. And of course, the motto that we are using is empowering nations and people through evaluation. So don't ever forget in the work that you do, it's about the people. It's not just something that is technical. You can look at this at leisure, eval year, and the various steps that we followed. And in terms of some concluding thoughts for this afternoon, it's important to state that it's necessary to drive evaluations at many levels and ensure that all of the complexity and context is addressed. When you do evaluation, they'll tell you this place is different, it's complex, you don't understand, you know the story. Take into account the complexity. But the complexity means that the principles must not be lost. No place is so unique that the basic tenets cannot work. Working across sectors and with partners helps to build support, but it's costly and it's complex again. But the more you have on board, the more likely you are to get buy-in. And that involves a new set of skills that need to come into play. Evaluation should ultimately help to improve the lives of people through ensuring development effectiveness. A lot of time is spent in extracting information from beneficiaries. I've seldom noticed the evaluators go back and give feedback to beneficiaries. It becomes a very elite activity at a certain point. And that's why stakeholder engagements and participatory methods, as best possible, should be used. The people you work with may not like it. The governments may not like it. But it is fundamental if you want to talk truth to power. And finally, professional and well-capacitated evaluation functions remain critical for this. And training such as IPDET is invaluable. And hence, my office and the UNDP continue to support IPDET in all ways it can, because this will help to make the difference that we all wish it to. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Ana. I work for federal government in Mexico. And as an economist who wants to have a better government for our citizens, I also wonder if the costs are correct in the system, in the administration in general. So I wanted to ask you if, from the evaluation perspective, are there new ways to include the cost of the structure, the cost of the bureaucracy in the evaluation of programs? Because I feel like we keep growing internationally and locally, and many good things are happening from the evaluation profession, but I wonder if it's not becoming more and more costly to have more bureaucracy.
I'll take a few.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions for Indran? We can take several.
Okay.
Wait a minute, we have to get the microphone.
Thanks. Hello, I'm Oli Sengupta. I work for the Government of Canada. And I wanted to know, how is the UN contributing to the professionalization of evaluation? I know that in Canada we have introduced credentialed evaluators, and I was wondering if that was the direction that the UN and others were thinking of going. I mean, becoming like the auditors maybe, getting a professional credential. So, wondering what you would.
And question right here.
Hello, I also work for the UN, and I am one of the participants always in the UNIC meetings. And I just came from this complexity evaluations workshop. And the question I had is, how can we in the UN actually factor complexities more into our independence? Because what we are learning right now is that actually, in order to address complexities, we also need to be part of the process. And of course, if I look at my office, this is something against the whole system we have built around, because our system is built in my organization around independence. And to be independent, you shouldn't be part of the process. But yet, I think it requires, I mean, this workshop for me is kind of mind-changing, because I see that it requires that we adapt as well to the new complexities we are confronted nowadays. And my question is to you, since you are also working for the UN and you are the chair of the UNEC, how can we address actually these issues also within the UN system? That we still keep independence, but still we acknowledge that we need to be from time to time part of the bigger process.
Thank you.
Wow, okay. Why don't you take these?
Okay, I'll take the first three. The first question from Mexico, I wasn't too sure whether you were talking about the cost of the bureaucracy. So when you're evaluating, you also factor in the cost of the evaluand. In other words, what is the cost of the administration that has to deliver the service? That most certainly needs to be done. It's an area where you're likely to get a lot of pushback. The criteria, the lens that is used in terms of the UN and in general and the UNDP in particular is relevance, efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. Relevance is the easy one to answer. Effectiveness, you can sort of get some data on it. Sustainability, I've looked at the work, it's not really good. Sometimes we say we're not sure. When it comes to efficiency, you're getting to the heart of the beast, because you're hitting out at what is the managerial cost, the cost of salaries in terms of delivering. And if you use the classic measures, quite often it'll find that the cost of delivering programs is far too high, and therefore there needs to be a chop. And quite often data like that can lead to bigger discussions in terms of whether the organization is well-staffed, it's efficient, and maybe it's too big, it's too bureaucratic. But evaluators need to get into that. It's really the area of management. Do you evaluate management? Because when you're talking about efficiency, that's what you do. Now, when I joined the office, I had noticed that in many of the country-level evaluations and the global program, there was some vague reference to management. And if you talk about any program, it's the programmatic element, it's the budget. Where is the management? And quite often, evaluators politely stay away from that terrain because it upsets people. But you need to evaluate management and what it means. So the evaluations that we have produced in the last 2 years, now they focus on management. And they make judgments on what the management was in the period that passed. And that, of course, means that you're not the good guy quite quickly. So you will see in the evaluation that's going to be, I think, launched, and you'll get it on a Twitter feed this week or next week, you'll find that I make quite strong comments about the way in which the bureaucracy managed programs. And management has the right to respond. So their response should come in the evaluation. Okay? So you have the recommendations and you have the management response. So the deal is they must not affect your evaluation after you've gone through the process, and you don't touch their management response. And it's up to the public to decide what is what. And that goes onto the website. But I would say that when you are strongly independent and you have the protections, then do go into the terrain of management. Because in many cases, you'll find the problems are linked to someone who has made certain decisions which lead to the problem, and they don't like to hear that. It's difficult, but it has to be done. In the evaluations of the IEO of UNDP, we focus on management. We do put down very clearly how efficient it was, and we point to the errors that have happened, because management must learn as well. Okay? So I hope that sort of answers your question. The second point, just to digress, the cost of evaluation. Quite often when there's restructuring or downsizing and the budgets are going down, people will say, well, everyone's taking a cut, evaluation and audit must also take a cut. Now, the question is, what is an adequate percentage for evaluation? There's various norms. Some say between 1% to 3%, 5%, etc. The UNDP independent evaluation is 0.2%, 0.2. It's way below any norm you would have. But I don't just believe it's about the amount that is spent. It's the quality of evaluations you get out. That's the first issue. The second point, if someone were to bring that up, you could say, it's quite fine to spend 1% to know how 99% is performing. Right? And in a context where there's reduction, you should have more evaluation, so you have more efficiency considerations. Right? So it's quite fine, just remember that, to spend 1% to know how 99% is performing. And the second question you could also pose when this comes is, who's paying? Who's funding it? And if it's the taxpayers or it's the donors, etc., they have a right to know what is the efficiency in terms of an organization that comes through. I hope that's answered to an extent. The second question, Oli, on accreditation. Juditha's working on that with me. We haven't really got going, but it's been a debate. I shared a platform, I think about 6 or 7 years ago with Michael Patton on the subject of accreditation and professionalization. It was at the 10th anniversary discussion. And I made the point that one needs to move to some form of certification, accreditation, but not to the point where it becomes exclusionary. Because the great danger in the evaluation profession, you have people from so many different types of fields and experience that if it becomes exclusionary and elite, you may actually cut out a huge part of the market. However, that does not mean that anyone just dives in and then calls themselves an evaluator. I have seen too many evaluations that are poorly done by people that are totally incompetent, that have made profound statements about matters and have got away with it because there's been no regulation. There has to be some form of regulation. And what we in UNEG are trying to do is to ensure that we regulate each other, because everyone is accountable, including evaluators. You would not jump into a plane if the pilot is not certified. Right? But we get evaluators, a few people that sometimes come in and make profound statements on programs. And that is a matter that definitely needs to be addressed, and we're trying to do so in UNEG. We would move to some form of certification. Eventually, I would hope. It's going to take time. There's going to be a pushback from evaluators themselves, because many are in the market and many are consultants, and they feel this is the way in which to preclude them from a living. Whatever it is, it's a tough discussion that needs to happen. I think it's problematic the way it is going, that it's, in many countries, seriously unregulated, and the people who are doing evaluations really should not be doing it. Your third point about complexity. You get the argument very often, you need to understand a program in order to evaluate. That's fine. Yes, you need to do so. But does that mean you need to immerse yourself so deep into the program that you do not see the shore? Right? Because increasingly, when you are doing an evaluation, people will want you to draw you in and in the noise to such an extent that you actually miss out on what the key and fundamental issues are. You need to have the detachment to stand back and call it as it is. There's a great danger if you get so immersed, almost in a sociological experience in there, that you will not be able to have the objectivity when you stand back and answer the fundamental questions of, has this program delivered or not? And my view, and I know there's debates and discussions, and I've been on panels on that, is irrespective of the complexity, everything is complex. Every country I go to and evaluate, they tell me the country is unique. It is unique. But nothing is so unique that you cannot answer the fundamental question of, is the program adding value as it stated it would or not? And that remains what should guide you. So, by all means, do understand, but not to the point where you get so drawn in that you lose your detachment. If you're doing independent evaluation, you must stand back and say it as it is, and be as cold and clinical as is necessary to do so. Ultimately, you've got to work out whether you are here to evaluate the program so that it is better, so that the people who are on the top listen, or are you here to make management feel good about all the activities they've done, which may or may not have added any value in the long run. I hope that gives you a perspective on where I stand on that issue.
Another question here. Another question there. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Nerea. I work in the evaluation office of UNCDF in New York. My question is a follow-up, actually. You, as the independent evaluation office, your report you said directly to the executive board. I would like to hear your thoughts on what is the appetite from the board, from the member states, in actually using innovative evaluation methods or different ways of rethinking evaluation. Because from our perspective, the demand for evaluation sometimes is, or often is going down from the program managers. They actually are more inclined to do internal approaches to evaluation, rather like more like complex monitoring and less costly assessments of how the program is doing. But we always get the idea of like, okay, this is for accountability. We have to report to our member states, what are we doing with the money that they put on our hands? So my question is there a space, is there a real space and an appetite from the board to innovate, to test, to risk other ways of doing evaluation? Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Lucien Ageter. I work for the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. You mentioned that the rate of activities which are evaluated is pretty high, for example, with UNDP. You also mentioned that if you design a new program or a new strategy, that the recommendations of previous evaluations have to be integrated. At the same time, with some organizations, we realized that there's an issue with the implementation of management actions recommended by evaluations or agreed on of the action plans. These rates sometimes are substantially low. What do you think is needed to increase these rates of management actions? What instruments would evaluations offices probably need, or a board or a management need to do in order to improve the implementation of these actions and of the lessons learned to some extent? Thank you.
Let's take these two.
Okay, sure. Thanks for these questions. The first one relates to the appetite of the board. In UNDP, the appetite of the executive board is extremely high because of the size of the program, the $5 to $7 billion budget, and the fact that the 42 members that sit on the executive board represent all the sectors, but largely the significant amount are the donors. They look to evaluation to get direction so that they can report to capitals and tell them whether they should continue funding the UNDP or not. So evaluation is taken very seriously. You'll see in the annual report on evaluation the statement from the executive, from the president of the board, who basically says that they look to evaluation to help them in their oversight and their decisions moving forward. The second point is, are they open to innovation? Generally what we present, I present to them, they've said yes to. And I don't think they're just saying yes because I present it. They say yes because the members of the board reference what we do as proposals back to capitals. And then capitals interrogate it, and based on whether they see any value, they get back and they agree on the plan. So the strategy, the plan, the 4-year evaluation plan, all actions that I wish to take, I have to run it through with the board. And so the appetite is very high there. So when I came 3 years ago and I said to them, I'm changing the model. The previous model was the office outsourced evaluations to consultants who then led it, and then the director signed it. When I came in, I changed the model and I led all evaluations with my staff, Because if I sign the evaluation, I take responsibility for content, which means the staff have to work more, but we have advisory panels to deal with issues. But we take command, we take responsibility for the evaluation. The boards, they agreed to it because there is a trend moving in that direction. But that can only come about if you've got professional evaluators who can do the work and you produce work which demonstrates that it's of high quality. If the quality drops, they're going to ask the evaluation director, maybe your model is not right, something is wrong. Right? So it does not mean, and independence is not about whether it's done externally or internally, it's about the process and the reporting structures and to ensure in that regard. I'm not sure about the other boards, but I do know in the UN system, the board that has the greatest appetite, one of the greatest appetites for evaluation is the UNDP. And I think largely because of the focus and the profile of it. The second part, listen, thanks for the questions, on management actions. I was asked last week, is 90% uptake on recommendations good enough? I think it's fine. Even if it's a lower percentage, it's fine. What is important is the quality of the uptake of recommendations. You can have 100% uptake and the recommendations that you provided are so weak that everyone can just actually meet it. They're low quality recommendations. I think what is more important is the management response demonstrating that the recommendations have, from a qualitative point of view, been integrated into the organization and have fundamentally changed thinking and is moving things forward. So if you go onto the website, you will see the management response in the various areas, and in some cases they say they disagree, which also is fine. Because in a democracy and in a context like this, we're not dealing with pure science. It's fine to disagree with a finding. It's fine to disagree with a recommendation. But the evaluation must be able to say why it holds the view. So one of the questions that was asked is, should not the evaluation office go back to management and check whether they've really done it? I don't think so. There can be another process, someone comes and audits it and sees where it's done. Because you really are putting something on the table, they need to act on it and to say what they've done, and then to move on with your other work of doing the rest of the evaluations. Otherwise, you can micromanage too much. And do not give too much detail in terms of what management must do. Point to the area. They are management. They need to look at the various considerations and decide how to take it forward. Last question.
Any other questions for, please, here.
Thank you. My name is Fiso from South Africa. Indran is my ex-boss, by the way. Indran, 3 questions. One is the question of independence vis-a-vis management, because it's not an easy one, particularly when you are internal. The second one you've touched on is the question of feedback, which is very, very important. Many a time, evaluations becomes an elite exercise because then we don't provide feedback to those that we are evaluating or the subject. The third one you have touched, but I need a clear explanation. The question of recommendations. There are 2 schools of thoughts. One says, don't put recommendations in your reports and the plan thereof. But another school of thought says it's very, very important to come up with the recommendations. Now, that should be guided by the TORs that you have, whether to include recommendations or not. My sense is that any evaluation without recommendations, there's going to be a challenge because then you are not recommending for an improvement, which I think evaluation needs to lead to improvement or a change. But if there is not there, then it becomes just a descriptive exercise, which I'm not sure whether it will bring the desired change. Thank you.
Sure. Let's take this one. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Afiso. Good to see you again. In terms of the independence and management, you know what we went through when we were at the Public Service Commission. Fortunately, we also have Professor Levine, who's in the audience, who is the head of the Public Service Commission and goes through this challenge daily. Independence depends how you're located in a department. It depends on what your reporting line is. If your reporting line is to management, then you need to accept that is your reporting line. But as far as you can push the boundaries, put the information frankly on the table. If, of course, you are in an oversight body like the Public Service Commission, where without fear, favor, or prejudice, because you're a constitutional body, you make recommendations to the department to the political head and the administrative head, and Parliament protects you, it's something different. My case in the UNDP is I don't report to management. I engage with management, but present the report to the board. And management then also presents on the same platform their response to the evaluation to the board. And the board then mediates to decide what the situation is on that. So hence being called independent, it also links to what the line is. But a great danger is that if one is so embedded within an organization that you're reporting right down to various levels of management, you're not going to have much influence. Because there's a tendency, a reflex from management to suppress negative information. That's a fact. So you need to work out yourself and how you fit into this situation. The second part about feedback, yes, feedback should be given to beneficiaries as best it can. The tendency is for that not to happen. And the reason for it is quite often an evaluation starts, it gets completed 1.5 years later. The world has changed then, and there's no point for that. But there are means and mechanisms to ensure that you give feedback. In the office that I head, we try as best we can in the stakeholder workshop to invite the people we engaged with to listen to the results and to listen to the findings. And they have always been very appreciative of it. They may not agree with what you say, but the fact that you have respected them and told them what you found, that alone is adequate. And that is something that quite often evaluators forget because it's viewed as costly. Your third element on recommendations, I believe you should have recommendations. Because when it's all done, you move from, you've got your findings, you have your conclusions. A next step would be recommendations. What do you want changed? There can be debate and discussion at that level, but not to have recommendations completely is just to present sort of research. And what makes the difference between the evaluation and research is you want some action to take place. So I think it's very important on that. However, I would invite all of you to go back and look afresh after this training course at the recommendations you have written and that have been written by your office. And ask yourself the question, how many of them are so generic it could apply to any organization? I think that would be really the thing, because evaluators, by the time they come to the end, and they normally tend to write 5 recommendations, no one knows why, they are so tired that they just do a cut and paste job, and hence management then says, you're telling us what we know. So really there's got to be a lot of thinking on the most fundamental act, which is given the least attention, and that is the writing of decent recommendations that can actually make a difference. Thank you.